Yeah, hello and welcome to this episode of Tech Roles Uncovered. This is a series of events in which we are talking about different tech roles or tech jobs and the career journeys of our guests. And if you're here for the first time, you should know that you can always ask your questions for our guests, for example, if you want to know more and if you want to contribute. Feel free to use the chat on LinkedIn or on YouTube, and then we are happy to take your questions directly to the live stream. So, today's topic and role that we are going to talk about is the role of the developer advocate. And therefore, I invited an experienced guest. And yeah, it's cool that she already worked in this kind of position for two different companies. So she brings already a broad view on this role, and I'm quite excited to learn more about her job and her responsibilities. And yeah, the next funny thing is that we both studied at the same university. We never met before, but still, we have the same university in our CV. She has a bachelor in international culture and business studies. And then she moved to tech, which is quite exciting. And I want to know more. What was her motivation to go into tech? Then she started her first job as a full time IT consultant at Camunda before she moved into the role of a developer advocate. Since the beginning of this year, she is now at Fiberplane and also in the role as a developer advocate. I'm really happy to hear more about her story and her job. So, welcome, Nele Uhlemann. Hi,
Hi,
Nele.
thanks. Hi, thanks for having me.
Nice that you're here with us today. Quite excited. And first of all, you have a very cool studio. So you're in a very professional environment right now. Where are you?
Not at home. I'm in the office, actually, at the Fiberplane office, but it's also not the Fiberplane office. Fiberplane is with different startups, and I'm in the office of Detail. They create a video production app, but they also have a very professional setup here for video recording. I'm also very excited about the setup, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think you're the one with the best settings so far. So therefore, you already have some kind of achievement in this kind of series. So really cool. Yeah, and thank you, first of all, for your time coming here and talking about your role. And as you may know, I always like to start with some easygoing introductory questions. And I also prepared three for you. So if you're ready, we can start right away.
Yeah, well, let's do that.
So, my first question, I think, maybe a quite easy one. So, are you more a person like a big city person, or do you prefer the countryside?
Oh, that's a very good question, and it's always hard to answer this like either or, but I think preferable, I live in a big city, but then if I get enough from the big city, I love doing holidays somewhere more remote on the countryside. So yeah, I think I need really both, but for
Mhm.
living, I would prefer the city.
So, where are you living right now?
I live in Berlin.
You live in Berlin. Cool.
Yeah.
So we also have someone watching us from Chicago. So hi.
Oh,
That's
wow.
really cool. Hi, Chicago. Or hi, person living in Chicago. Where exactly? Yeah, cool. And then continuing with the next question. So, as a developer advocate, you used to be, yeah, or attending some conferences already. So, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to attend as a speaker or more as an attendee?
Oh, also a very brilliant question because I just had my first tech conference ever last week that I attended as an attendee after being
Mhm.
like 5 years in tech. It was the first time I ever was in the role of the attendee, and I
Mhm.
loved it. I was never more relaxed at a conference than at that point because normally if I go to a conference, I do have a presentation or I'm at the booth because my company might sponsor.
Mhm.
So I like that as well. So I like both. But I really liked the switch last week. So
Mhm.
to be in the shoes of an attendee was really, really good.
What kind of conference was it?
That was Spring I/O in Barcelona.
Ah, okay. So a globetrotter.
Yeah, kind of.
Now in Amsterdam, then Barcelona, Berlin. Cool. And my last question for you is, during my research, I saw that Fiberplane has, well, if I did it correctly, three major partners right now, or integrating partners. It's Prometheus, Elasticsearch, and Grafana. Is there one tool, one service that you like the most to work with?
Also a good question. I think currently I work a lot with Prometheus, and I had to learn a lot about the querying language it uses to get metrics out of the
Mhm.
applications. Can be sometimes a pain, but I think that's a real fun part also about the job, talking about the pain points sometimes people have when working or using a different software, and seeing what can we do to make it easier, or what can be a solution there. So yeah, think I'm working most with Prometheus at the moment, but I also do like working with the other tools. So
Mhm. Cool. Then thank you very much. That was the introductory part. But of course, I would also like to know a little bit more about you and your background. So if you would be so kind to introduce yourself briefly, it would be, yeah, really nice.
I mean, you did good research, right? So you said already I studied in Passau, I did international business and culture there, and then I moved to Berlin and did my master's already, then with a tech focus in business informatics. And in the meanwhile, I started working at Camunda as a working student. And from there, it was a very smooth transition into my first tech role as a technical consultant. And again, a very smooth transition into the role of being a developer advocate, although I've never heard about that role before. So that was definitely something I didn't know I would do at one point of my life, but now I'm
Mhm.
here. So
So, but how was the situation? So you studied international business or cultural studies, which has, I would say, mainly nothing to do with tech, or at least only a bit. I don't know exactly because it was not my studies. But how did it came that you created interest in technology and software engineering?
yeah, I think you're right. It's not the study you would associate with something technical. During that study, I had basically two courses touching the topic of business informatics, and I think both were super important. The
Mhm.
first one was about process automation or business process modeling mainly,
Mhm.
and basically that's the reason why I joined Camunda later, because you know how that is. If you go through your study slides before your exam, you realize, oh, I forgot about what's on there, and it was mentioned the Camunda house
Mhm.
in the context of BPMN, and I had to look it up, and I ended up on the webpage or homepage of Camunda. Couldn't find information about the Camunda house, but learned that the company looked quite interesting and nice. And the second course I took then in university was about ERP systems, and I had a really frustrating moment in that course because you learned how to click on the UI, but you never understood the underlying like data
Mhm.
transfer and how things are processed. And I think both motivated me to really explore systems more and understand how things work underneath. And then I moved to Berlin and needed a job, and I still had this Camunda house in mind. And basically, then I applied for a working student job at that company, and that was basically at the same time starting business informatics studies at University Potsdam, but also starting working for a tech company.
That's a great story. And it's so cool to see that university lectures actually have an impact on our job, because oftentimes we are learning so many things that we will never use again. But in your, yeah, like in your story, it had a great impact. So it brought you to tech.
Definitely, yeah.
Really nice. So, you studied business informatics and then you started as an IT consultant. And when exactly did you came up with the idea of becoming a developer advocate?
Oh, that's a good question. And I don't know if I came up with that myself or if it was my coworker. I think we were all in the consulting team back then, and the company was also growing. So that's also a state that's interesting because once a company grows, there are more functionalities and more departments created, and they specialize more into certain areas. And because it was an open source tool, I think someone came up with the idea we should talk about having a department or a team called developer relation. And one
Mhm.
of my coworkers I worked really closely with in the consulting team was going to that team. And I think he kind of said, I think you would be really good in that. And I was like, I don't know. But then I also realized that a lot of like the things we did in the consulting team, like going to the conferences or like joining meetups to give presentations, were going to that department. And then I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I should just try that out. And luckily, I had a very supportive company that was making that possible for me too. So I could internally apply then for this position. And yeah, that was basically the switch. But I think the
Mhm.
real motivation was a person coming to me or my coworker saying, I think you would be good in this. And I also think it would be great if we work together. And I think that was a really good decision.
And what did you do in this moment when this coworker came to you and proposed this new role to you? Um, did you have, yeah, did you have a clear understanding or idea what this role actually means by this time?
Hmm, I don't think so, no. Well, I saw what he was doing, right? And I think we did it in a very clever way because he was stealing me sometimes already for some work. So he was like, oh, yeah, you should like join this live stream because I need someone else than me. Like, we should do this together. And I could like get a really soft entry in the role because by seeing what he was doing and also joining him in some projects. And that was I think that was a really smooth start in understanding what the role would be in the end. So yeah.
Mhm.
But the
So,
but the first time I had no clue what it is, to be honest. Also, the first time it was introduced in the company that we will have it, I was like, okay, I've never heard about that.
so what would you say now? What is a developer advocate and what are you mainly doing?
Wow, good question. I think it's a yeah, it's a role that sits normally in the or in between marketing and engineering. And for me, it's important that it's not a truly marketing position, but it really is in between. It's a lot about listening and communicating and collaboration, but also like providing examples, technical code examples that people understand to use the software for that you work. Normally, you work for a company that builds tools for developers, or the role also exists in bigger organizations. For example, I think Spotify has it, Netflix. But those companies also provide often open source solutions that are
Mhm.
available for other developers, or it's more the internal advocacy among different engineering teams. But yeah, I think it is really about like not only promotion, but really understanding also certain topics and problems in the field of development and see how you can address them. And I think it's not always like you bring up your solution you work for, but it's really understanding what are the pain points, what are problems, and finding, yeah, good answers to that or interesting perspectives. I think that's also something that you start changing perspectives and start thinking outside of the box how to solve different problems.
Mhm. Yeah. The first thing that I found on the internet when I Googled developer advocate was the statement, it's the developer's best friend.
Oh, wow. I don't know. Um, could be potentially. I've never considered me as a best friend of a developer. That's an interesting statement. Yeah, maybe there is something in there if you consider that you work for a developer tool, someone uses it, they probably will know your face if you work for that tool as a developer advocate. They will know that you provide answers. Like it's a lot also about the community thinking, not just of like, oh, I go there and give a presentation, but it's also a lot of like, oh, I listen to what they need. And I
Mhm.
also provide answers if they have questions, for example, in a forum or in a Slack space or whatever, trying to help really, to find solutions.
Mhm.
Does it make a best friend already? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. It's not my job actually. It's just what I found on the internet, and I found it an interesting statement. We got our first questions already. So Maria asked, "What do you think are the not so obvious qualities of a good developer advocate?"
Oh, wow. That's also a very good question. I think it's a role where you communicate, so you should think of that as a skill as well. It's a soft skill, and often we forgot that this is also something that has a lot of value in those types of roles. It's also communication that you give back to product teams. And influence roadmaps decisions. So there is this part and also some part of strategic thinking. And yeah, I think those are sometimes not seen that much. And then, of course, also like the hard skills should also match. I think there should be a knowledge about the code base. There should be a knowledge about the technology you advocate for. Yeah, but I think it's a lot. Yeah, it's a good mix, and it's a really good question.
Yeah, I think so too. Thank you very much for this question, Maria. I like it a lot that you're emphasizing this communication part a lot, because I think it's not so obvious when you hear the role of a developer advocate in the first place. But it makes totally sense, because you're some kind of the interconnection of these different departments. You have to bring the feedback in both ways. So you're like interconnecting these different groups that have interest in the technology part, and you are this human um, yeah you are this human that is doing this interconnection, so to say.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question, and I will continue with the next question, because I think it fits quite well. Nora asked, did you have any specific trainings for that role?
No, I don't think so, no. Um, I mean, it was a lot learning by doing, and then already having senior people that did that role in the team when I joined was definitely a help. So seeing what they do and learning a lot like with them together, discovering what you like in the team and what work you like to do, because also the work is very diverse. It's about addressing problems for developers, but also sometimes you create content. But the type of content you create can be very different based on your preferences. Some people like to do video tutorials, and other people like to write blog posts. And it's kind of a discovery journey for yourself to find out what you like.
Mhm. Yeah. Would you think that there is a need to create some kind of educational program for that? Because I don't know if the demand is increasing in the role of developer advocates, but there are still a lot of skills needed that are, I think it's nothing that you can take for granted.
Yeah, definitely. I think there might be already some good courses on specific topics. So if you want to learn how to write better blog posts, I think you could look
Mhm.
for those type of courses.
Mhm.
Because I also think in the whole space of developer advocacy, we come with very different backgrounds. For example, for me, communication is nothing that I had to learn that much. I think I'm
Mhm.
already quite good in it, but I've never worked as a software engineer, so I had to skill up my skills on that level way more than other people maybe. And I had to learn more the part of like, okay, what does it mean to write code for production? Because if you've never done this, you have to learn it in a different way. While maybe a coworker already was really good in that, but then maybe that person needed a different skill to fulfill this role. So I think a general training program can be very hard. Um, but I think it should be a little bit like looking what the person needs to be successful in the role in the end.
Mhm. Ja. And I think it definitely has a lot to do in which kind of industry you're working with. So you mentioned that in the beginning of the talk that Fiberplane is a software product for developers, and of course the role can differ. For example, at Spotify, it can be a quite different role. Maybe to make it even more clear. Could you also explain us a little bit what Fiberplane is doing and providing for developers?
Yes, sure. So
Uh-huh.
there are basically two things at the moment. It's a quite young company, and I think I talk about that what is to my heart at the moment. We build open source libraries, and I talked briefly about Prometheus and the idea to get information or observability data out of your applications is needed because you need to understand what your systems do in production. And Prometheus is a way to store metrics. And we created open source libraries, we call them autometrics for different
Mhm.
languages, that makes it first easy to instrument method and functions in your code base. And then the really magic happens because it also writes the Prometheus queries, the one that I
Mhm.
don't like. So it
Mhm.
helps you with providing the error rate, the latency, and the request rate for every function or method in your code. And based on that, of course, you get insights into the behavior and you can start debugging your system and improve your system.
Mhm.
And yeah, we started this year as a project, and it's quite cool. I really like it. And there's also like now the possibilities to define SLOs in your code
Mhm.
base. So it's kind of like you say, okay, if this two metrics or three metrics, if they go over a certain amount of percentage, we want to have an alert in our channel
Mhm.
so we can act on that. And doing that in the code base is kind of really cool.
Mhm.
And the other thing we have, and they will be connected at one point, is a notebook to debug infrastructure. And it's
Mhm.
a tool basically aiming at DevOps and SREs to get insights into the infrastructure. I don't know, do you know Jupyter notebooks?
Yes, I was. I wanted to state that it's for me. It looks like similar, like a mixture of Notion,
Yeah.
Notion and a Jupyter notebook. That was my first impression when I saw the video today.
Perfect. Then we do something right because that's exactly like it's
Cool.
the idea. But
Mhm.
instead of like in a Jupyter notebook, you would put code and you would execute your
Ah.
code. But here
Mhm.
you can put the query to a certain data provider. For example, you can connect Prometheus there and say, hey,
Mhm.
give me, I don't know, give me the metrics of maybe my functions rate. And then you will
Mhm.
get it in the notebook. And then you also can put the information about your logs, for example, from
Mhm.
Elasticsearch. And the idea is not to have it in different places, but have them together when debugging, and also not having just dashboards and monitors, but also provide more this document structure where people can work together on.
Mhm. Quite interesting. I've never seen something similar like that before. Of course, a Jupyter Notebook, and as people may know, I'm coming from the data side and data analytics, so I can relate to this analytical part of monitoring models, for example. But I've never worked with infrastructure and systems like you do. But I can imagine it's quite something quite new approach. Um, well, that's a question, or we
It's a,
can turn it into a question.
we can turn it into a question. So also, disclaimer, I joined Fiberplane in January, so I'm also quite new to the space,
Ah,
but I
okay.
really like to explore it at the moment. I think the notebook idea itself, I saw it in different tools as well, so it's maybe not a completely unique thing, but I think
Mhm.
Fiberplane is really good in concentrating on this as a single value and makes the notebook a really good experience.
Mhm.
And having autometrics as open source libraries really brings a good combination of having a good observability value that is not only for SRE teams, but makes it easier for all engineering teams to,
Mhm.
yeah, to collaborate.
Mhm. Okay. Quite interesting. Quite cool.
I could talk more about it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely worth another session, in-depth session about the tooling. However, coming back to your actual role, is it that you are now also working in a team, or is it more that you are like an individual contributor, helping out individuals from time to time?
At the moment, I'm the only one at
Mm-hmm.
Fiberplane because the company is still small, and that's
Mm-hmm.
quite different. I think that's also a change of when you have a team, you can specialize in a thing that you really that you like and that you're good in. And if you don't have that team at one point, you realize, oh, I have to do all the other things now as well that I used to do with the team together, and now I'm like the one person doing different things. But also in a very small company, I think you have also coworkers that are really helpful. So maybe that's also something that I found really interesting in general in this in being in developer relations. It's not only the job of the team to do all the work that developer relations is defining, because you often will have those people doing developer relations sitting in different teams. You might have this one developer that built a really
Mm-hmm.
cool tool and can talk way better about it than this person should do it, I think. You also might have people very strong in the community doing stuff that also would count as a developer relation activity. So it is really not the that makes it also nice to work in that field, because you never work just only in your team on something. You have always like this really cool contributors from the outside as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, sounds like a very how can I say that in English? I'm missing the vocabulary. So if you have very different stakeholders, it's I think each day can be quite different. So I imagine it to be quite different each day and hard to categorize it as I asked you. But
Yeah.
I think we can come back to that later because we got two more questions that I would like to take into the stream. The first is from Severin. Hi. If and how is your progress success at work measured? What are your goals as a developer advocate? Oh, very good question.
Oh yeah. And I think there are two answers to it, because I think it's one of the only it's one of the roles that either sits developer relations with marketing, and then you are more tied to marketing goals, or you sit in the engineering part and then you are more tied to engineering goals. And I've never worked for a developer advocate role in the marketing position or in the under a marketing umbrella. I always was more in the engineering part. And at that moment, or I feel it's a lot how is it measured then? It's not that much about like how many people saw your talk, but it's a lot about the communication you take back and the roadmap you influence the product with, like bringing ideas forward, but also
Mhm.
seeing opportunities to work with different technologies together and maybe build a partnership there, or provide some examples and code basically like as an integration
Mhm.
for certain tools.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of strategical impact that you have, and combining like the different feedback from the community, from people that you meet on conferences, and bringing that back directly to the roadmap in the
Yeah.
best way or in the best case. Mhm.
I mean, of course, you could measure quantity, or you can always measure
Yeah,
quantity metrics as well. How many pieces of content has someone produced? But I think in that role, it's also important to look at the quality, because, of
yeah.
course, I could write like every week a blog post, but what would that tell really about the quality if I want to address certain problems and topics, and if I don't want only to like the best search words in the internet and write something about them, right? So
True.
there's a really fine line here.
Yeah. Yeah, and with all these AI services coming up right now, I think coming up with an amount of blog posts is not even a big thing anymore. So if you would be measured on that, I think it wouldn't be a good metric for the future.
It's also the question what you do with all that content, right? Is it really
Mhm.
helpful in the end? And
Yeah.
that's a very like interesting question in general. How can you measure the quality of things that you produce? And I
Mm.
think it's not an easy question to answer. There are different ways, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Thank you very much, Severin, for your question. And then I will continue with the next question directly. Manu. Hi, Manu. Nice seeing you again in the stream. His question is: did, or maybe still do, you struggle with imposter syndrome? What helps you feel confident in your role?
Yeah, I do struggle with that, I think. So, um, my own or personal struggle I can share here personally is really like this. Oh, I've never worked as a software engineer. It's coming always in my head as this little voice. It's getting better, but it's not away completely. I think what it helps to get more confidence is to see and understand that I really leveled up my skills, and also talk to different people in that role and understand that everyone comes from a different background and no one in that role comes with a completely set of skills into that role directly. So everyone has to learn and level up the skills in that role. That might be for other roles the same, right? So
Mm,
it's just, but it really helps, like talking with other people about it as well. So like, okay, um, yeah, understanding that you're not the only one not coming with a complete skill set somewhere.
yeah. I think it gets a lot easier if you're part of a team and you see that each of you has a different speciality or some kind of expertise someone else doesn't have, and then you can complement each other. I think it's always a little bit more of a struggle if you're completely alone and if you think you have to embody every skill of a typical developer advocate, which is not existing, to be honest. Or well, you already said that it's not existing. There's no this typical role, and yeah, I think that's what makes it even harder with the imposter syndrome. But yeah, everyone has that.
Yeah, but it's very nice that you mentioned it, because the team, my first team, I think that was a really good like support, a very supportive environment. I really liked working in that team, and we had all very different skill sets, and we had a lot of fun together, but also like could rely on each other in very good ways. So
Mm,
definitely something that
yeah.
that helped.
That's true. Yeah, there's one question that I would have to the audience watching us right now. So, are you a developer advocate yourself and want to know what Nele is doing and compare her role to yours? Or maybe the second question, do you have experience working together with developer advocates, and what is your experience? How are you working together and collaborate with your developer advocate in your team? It would be interesting to hear about that and also discuss about this. And before we receive any answers to these questions, I would really like to go a little bit deeper into your task and responsibilities and also check your chart of task distribution. Thank you very much for yeah, providing this information before our stream. And maybe we can go from left to right and go in a little bit more details what it actually means. For example, for this 20% of the coding, what are you doing? Like
Very
precisely.
important. If you want to use Fiberplane, don't be worried. I'm not touching the production code, so I'm staying away from this. Like I would phrase it like this: every week can be a hack week, so you can work on something and build something, hack something together. It's more really defining the use cases.
Ah.
And on a technical level, I do think that those 20% of coding are super important, because I feel it's an important skill to have when
Mhm.
working with software developers. Also finding those integration points, and seeing what your software or the tool you're working with is capable of. Understanding the technologies, because it's not only your tool. Normally, it's not, because the
Mhm.
software cycle and development is like a huge chain of different tools, and you need to be aware of what's going on before and after in your chain or on your tool. Um, yeah, so not production code, but basically examples that can be used for tutorials or for integrations or other interesting angles to look at. Then it's community, and I put it
Mhm.
there. also with 20%, I think it also varies a little bit and depends, but normally you work with people together using your software. That could be customers, but it could be also people using an open source tool. And
Mhm.
working with the community can mean you answer the questions, but also, interestingly enough, now in a company that has not the biggest community at the moment, it's not only working with the existing community, but it's also an outreach to other communities that are close to your tools. So, for example,
Mhm.
at the moment, I mentioned Prometheus. Prometheus is
Yeah.
also another open source tool. So looking what's going on in the Prometheus community and what questions do they have, and how can you work together maybe with people from the Prometheus community, because you can also contribute to other communities,
Mhm.
which is nice, because only expecting that you contribute, that you get contributions, it's maybe a hard position.
Interesting. Do you have also some automation service in order to watch and monitor all these community happenings, or do you do that manually?
No, there are some tools that you can use, definitely connected to GitHub, for example, where you can
Mhm.
see how many stars over time your project gets,
Mhm.
or how community members, how active they are. So there exist a few tools in the market to measure community activity
Mm.
around projects. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Uh, nice. So it's community. And one question that I have to add here too. So, when you, yes, so to say, I always ask the people for whom they are mostly working for. So, what are their clients? So, would you say it's the developers outside that are using Fiberplane or are going to use Fiberplane? And is it also your internal developers? Is it both, or do you have
Yeah, we use it internally as well.
yeah?
But as Fiberplane is small and is building a dev tool towards developers, I think the user base will be always more on the outside. I mean,
Mhm.
our part will eat your own dog food, right? Basically,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
using your
yeah.
own product also is helpful. But if you look at Spotify, and I'm just assuming here, I've never talked to a developer advocate at Spotify. I just know the role exists there. So I think that's different, because in such a big organization, your main business model is not providing a developer tool that is used by developers. Your main business model is actually that you provide a music streaming platform, right? So
Mhm. Yeah.
there the role might be different, because you might make sure that different engineering teams are working together better, or you might have open source tooling that doesn't make any money or any business sense in that part, that you might help to understand and help the community to work with. So that makes it, I guess, different.
Mhm. Yeah, true. Yeah. Um, Good to know that. And when we take a look on this 20% of this feedback, I think you wrote me that it's providing the feedback, what you get from the community back to your development team, right?
Both ways, right? So it's a one
Mhm.
time, it's a roadmap influence that you give, but also maybe sometimes the product team takes decisions and you need to
Mhm.
communicate that back then to the existing community,
Mm.
right? So
Mhm.
that's also part of this whole feedback cycle. And I think feedback also could rely in, for example, if you work with different specifications, you could join different groups and influence also, like, for example, open standards and specification groups, in terms of like providing feedback how you use the standard. And
Mhm.
that's then also like influencing the roadmap of maybe something that's not completely in your organization, but is something external.
Mhm. So that's the communication part most of all.
Yeah, I think so.
And
Yeah.
maybe also the next one, the content creation part. What kind of content are you creating most of the time?
Good. As well, I said, like, content can be a lot. It can be a blog
Mhm.
post, it can be video, it can be a conference talk. I think that's also content. It can be a
Mhm.
podcast. There's different types. I think I think the most things that I did in the past is really blog posts and
Yeah.
videos.
Mhm.
for content creation and also conference talks. But sometimes you also recycle, right? So you don't have to, if you have a blog post already on a certain topic, you might do something a little bit different, but you might make a video out of it. So it's not always like, okay, you have to reinvent the wheel all the time. You start thinking about content creation. A lot of what I like is that also the coding influences the content, because if you did a really cool example, of course you can publish it, but then also you need to provide the right content so people understand
Mhm.
what you did there, right? So
Yeah.
only putting the code into a repository and say, hey, here it is, it's not super helpful. So then maybe have a good README as content as well, but then also maybe provide a video or a blog post how best you can use it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really helpful, definitely, especially if you have ever worked with open source tools, and yeah, you might know that there is always this community part where you help each other out. But if you actually have someone from the tool side, like Fiberplane and the developer advocate, it's even more helpful to get the help like from the first hand, so from the tool provider, and to have different kind of content types in order to help out the people. Yeah, cool. And then you have these conferences and meetup part. That's quite interesting. So it's taking a huge part of your whole yeah, of your whole responsibilities, right?
Definitely. So it's also, I assume, different in different companies, but normally
Mhm.
companies sponsor conferences, and then it's very nice, or I like that, to be also at the conference, at the booth, to talk
Mhm.
to people about what you
Yeah.
do and what they do, basically, to understand if there is an interest in the product, or if there is something that is matching. Also, like the part about content and conference talks is like you go to conferences to speak about certain topics, about certain things you are passionate about, and about certain things you discovered maybe yourself that might be
Mhm.
interesting for others to hear. And then meetups is the same. It's just a smaller conference level where you have different user groups of different topics, where it's interesting first to attend, to see what they are talking about. But then also, if you have good content, you can also provide a topic to present there as well. So yeah. And I think the funny part is about this line. If you would have asked me like for only 1 month, and we would have
Yeah.
considered like now April, the conference and meetup part would have gone to 90%, because all the conferences that like are just happening now in spring, and then there is a
Yeah.
summer break with no conferences at all, and then it starts in fall again. But yeah.
Mhm. And in winter, there's no conference time, right? So winter.
Maybe before Christmas, but yeah, then there is a Christmas break. Then normally no, I would say over Christmas it's quite quiet. So it's really like
Mhm.
the spring and the fall season where you see like a lot of events are happening.
Mhm. Yeah. So, what would you say? How many conferences do you attend per year on average?
On average. Should I do it for the last year? I think the last year were maybe 5 to 7 or something like
Mhm.
that. And then, but not counting the meetups. The meetups are
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
So yeah. But
So,
it's also something I like to do. So I think
yeah.
that's also fair to say not every developer advocate is asked to join that many conferences and
Mhm.
meetups, especially if you have a team. You can also look what one person likes, maybe the other doesn't, so they can like,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And then to conclude this part, you have yeah, you do something with partnerships. So I think you are helping out with creating new partnerships.
yeah, I
Is
think
that right?
yeah, in a certain way with community members, or with like technology integrations, in terms of like, of course, that's not only you, it's not only developer relation specific. There might be also solution engineering or other teams involved. Like for all of
Mhm.
those things, by the way, I just want to say it's not
Mhm.
exclusively belonging to the Department of Developer Relation. You always will have yeah, people helping you in the different buckets. And
Mhm.
with partnerships, it's, I think, the same. If you find an interesting angle to look at how you could combine something, how you could maybe bring another provider into the Fiberplane stack to say, okay, there is now Prometheus, Loki, and Elastic, but what if we want to bring in MongoDB as another
Mhm.
database? Maybe there is a nice partnership you can look at, and you can foster it.
Mhm.
You can see how that could work together.
That's really interesting. It has so many parts of also business development and all these strategic input that, well, I would like to describe it in this way as I see it. Well, I've never worked with a developer advocate, to be honest. It would have been a pleasure to, but I never had the chance so far. Yeah, so thank you very much. It looks very interesting. Various different tasks and responsibilities that you are doing, and it also looks like a lot of work, but also fun.
Definitely. Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, I have to say that. I think that's one thing that is important, a passion for technology and like
Mhm.
the wish to explore things, because if you start this role, you are constantly learning and you are not like in the position to say, okay, now I'm done, I know everything, because there's the next technology that comes around the corner and you want to see what's it about. So I think it's a very good characteristic to have the passion for technology and also
Yeah,
this like exploration.
yeah, yeah. Definitely. And then combined with this communication passion and also this ability or the joy of exposing yourself also in front of people, going outside, do networking, and also explain about your stuff that you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Maybe to sum it up, because we are already yeah, like 2 minutes over time. I would come up with, or yeah, I would end it with a final question, especially about your career journey and what you have learned over time, and what was your, yeah, main or most important career booster so far. So was there anything in your career that was helping you a lot to develop into a specific direction?
Oh, also good. It's a really good question. And probably I don't have the best and perfect answer here. I think it's a lot about the idea of I think like this really like help like a team that is supportive and supports each other, and this feeling of feeling a good environment for learning and a safe space. I think that can be a real booster. I think for me that
Mhm.
has been a booster. And also like, yeah, having allyship and sponsorship when needed. So I learned about sponsorship just recently that someone told me that's a person that brings up your name in meetings where you are not present. And I just realized I think I had a sponsor,
Mhm.
or I had multiple sponsors maybe, and I think that's important. And I'm really happy that, yeah, that I had them.
Definitely. It's always a lot easier if you have people surrounding you, or in your team that is seeing your talent, that is helping you on your way and also to reach your goals. And yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And I think it's a nice ending for our today's session. First of all, Nele, thank you very much again for coming, for telling your story, for giving us insights about your job, your role, and everything around Fiberplane. And yeah, maybe to end it here. First, I want to make a promotion for next week. So, next week, Thursday, we will have our next live event with our next guest. And the role that we are going to talk about is the satellite data scientist. It's a very specific role, or specialized and exotic role in the data science space. It's going to be very interesting. We will talk about wildfire detection and monitoring. And I'm really exciting to hear about what my guest's job actually is. And if you want to help us, and don't want to, yeah, miss any next event, better subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on LinkedIn. It's always a, a good thing to do. And it will be really great to meet you again the next time. And finally, I would like to hand it over to you, Nele, again for the last words to end up this session.
Oh, wow. That's an honor. Thanks for having me, first of all. And yeah, I think if someone watches this and has questions, feel free to reach out. We have to talk if you have questions, I think. And that's the best way to learn more. So yeah, feel always free to ping me if there is something that was unclear for you.
Thank you very much. Nice ending. Bye bye, everyone. Bye bye, Nele.
Bye.